All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. We're really excited to host you all for such an amazing webinar and amazing event we have planned today to discuss this current moment that we're in. Now, before we get started, I don't want to take up too much of you all's time, but we do want to get started with a very quick dua that inshallah I'll be leading. I'll be passing it over to our Quran reciter and then over to our CEO and our fearless leader, Walz Zayyat, inshallah. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. All praises be to Allah, the Almighty. All praise be to Allah, the owner of the heavens, the owner of the earth, and everything in between. It is He who provides, it is He who withholds, it is He who raises, and it is He who lowers. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who gives us the ability to act and organize for our brothers and sisters globally. It is He who we ask to be with our brothers and sisters in Palestine. We ask to be with our brothers and sisters in Sudan. We ask to be with our brothers and sisters in Lebanon. Oh Allah, we ask you to be with our brothers and sisters in Congo, in Kashmir, in Burma, and our brothers and sisters who are the Uyghurs that are in China. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, we ask you to be with our brothers and sisters in Chicago, to be with our brothers and sisters in Philadelphia and in Detroit, Ya Allah. We ask you to be with our brothers and sisters globally, whose names I may not be able to speak, Ya Allah, but you are all knowing, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, we ask you to honor them. We ask you to elevate them. We ask you to protect them. We ask you to calm their fears, to cure their sick. We ask you to comfort them, Ya Allah. Oh Allah, the world begins to become, as the world begins to become desensitized to the pain and suffering of our brothers and sisters around the globe, we ask you to never allow our hearts to harden to their pain, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we ask you for those whose water is cut off from them, whose food is cut off from them, whose electricity is cut off from them, Ya Allah, the basic necessities of human life. We ask you to be their food. We ask you to be their water. We ask you to be their electricity. We ask you to sustain them. We ask you to provide for them. You are the best of providers, Ya Allah. We ask you to protect them. We ask you to protect those that are innocent, those that are women, those that are children. We ask you to elevate the names of our heroes. We ask you to be with the families of Shireen Abu Akla, to be with the family of our beautiful, courageous Wadia, to be with the family of our beautiful Hind, and of course the students in Vermont and every campus across the globe. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, elevate our brother and his family from Dearborn, Michigan, who we have just lost, Al-Hajj Kamal Jawad, who spent his last moments serving his people, Ya Allah. May we learn from his example, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, accept our intentions and forgive us for our misactions, Ya Allah. أقول قولي هذا وصلوات على النبي نبينا محمد والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Ameen. And so I just want to pass it over to our Quran reciter, who will, inshallah, be reading from verses from the Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولقد صرفنا في هذا القرآن للناس من كل مثل وكان الإنسان أكثر شيء جدلا وما منع الناس أن يؤمنوا إذ جاءهم الهدى ويستغفروا ربهم إلا أن تأتيهم سنة الأولين أو يأتيهم العذاب قبلا وما نرسل المرسلين إلا مبشرين ومنذرين ويجادل الذين كفروا بالباطل ليدحضوا به الحق واتخذوا آياتي وما أنذروا هزوا ومن أظلم ممن ذكر بآيات ربه فأعرض عنها ونسي ما قدمت يداه إنا جعلنا على قلوبهم أكنة أن يفقهوه وفي آذانهم وقرا وإن تدعهم إلى الهدى فلن يهتدوا إذا أبدا وربك الغفور ذو الرحمة لو يؤاخذهم بما كسبوا لعجل لهم العذاب بل لهم موعد لن يجدوا من دونه موئلا وتلك القرى أهلكناهم لما ظلموا وجعلنا لمهلكهم موعدا وإذ قال موسى لفتاه لا أبرح حتى أبلغ مجمع البحرين أو أمضي حقبا فلما بلغا مجمع بينهما نسيا حوتهما فاتخذ سبيله في البحر سربا صدق الله العليم. The verses you just heard are from the 18th chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, a chapter rich with profound wisdom. Among its gems is a powerful focus on the qualities of a just and responsible leader, emphasizing fairness, protection of the people, and wise decision-making. These verses in particular highlight the limitations of human understanding and the importance of following truth and guidance. They serve to encourage our leaders of today to approach their roles with humility and attentiveness, and to heed the needs and wisdom of the communities they serve rather than dismiss them. The message for leaders today is clear. Listen to those you serve, seek counsel from the right people, act justly, and remain mindful of the lasting impacts your decisions have on society. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and good evening. I am Walz, CEO of Engage Action. Jazakallah khairan to our Qari and to our entire team at Engage Action staff and board and supporters for all the hard work they've done this year in particular, and also to prepare for this event. I'm so thrilled and honored to be introducing our next speaker. But first, I want to acknowledge that our community is experiencing profound pain and sadness, given what is happening in Gaza and Lebanon and the Middle East. I know many of you with us tonight are heartbroken. So are we here at Engage. But this election is about hope and working to bring that change that we deserve. Our country needs leaders who care about everyday Americans, who celebrate our diversity and are in it for the right reasons. Governor Walz is that person. Tim Walz is a champion of America's working families and a former union member. He enlisted in the National Guard at 17 and served for 24 years. He then served his country even more as a high school teacher and a football coach. He became a member of Congress in a Republican district by representing the needs of farmers and rural America. As governor, Tim Walz cut taxes for working families. He lowered costs of insulin and eliminated junk fees. He signed paid leave into law so parents can take care of their sick family members without losing their jobs. He established universal background checks for gun purchases. And he worked across the aisle to pass legislation for improving our infrastructure. As governor, he has done more to help middle-class America than anyone else in recent memory. The Muslim American community, like so many out there, was thrilled when Vice President Harris selected Tim Walz to be her running mate. We know he will do all that he can to protect our pluralistic democracy and work hard to make sure that the next administration serves all of us and protects our country and our globe. Assalamu alaikum.
Well, thank you all for the kind introduction. Salam alaikum. Thank you all for taking time to be here. You're here for one simple reason. You love this country. Vice President Harris and I are incredibly grateful for the endorsement of Engage Action. We know how influential you've been, and we know the work you did in the 2020 election to elect Joe Biden. Here in Minnesota, I've got the privilege to represent an incredible and vibrant Muslim community. My wife Gwen and I were proud to host the first iftar held at the Minnesota governor's residence in 2019. We partnered with the community through our transition to our administration and made sure we were focusing on the things that you care deeply about: support for education, childcare, housing. And here in Minnesota, we passed interest-free financing for down payments for Muslim homeowners. But as Walz said, I know the pain of this community is deep. Our hearts are broken. The concern of the Vice President and Harris and I, it's on our minds every day. The scale of death and destruction in Gaza is staggering and devastating. Tens of thousands of innocent civilians killed, families fleeing for safety over and over again. We all know on here this war must end, and it must end now. The Vice President's working every day to ensure that, to make sure Israel's secure, the hostages are home, the suffering in Gaza ends now, and the Palestinian people realize the right to dignity, freedom, and self-determination. Across this country, we've seen the acts of Islamophobia and anti-Arab hate. Last year, Vice President and Second Gentleman met with Hanan Shaheen as her son Wadia was murdered in an act of senseless violence aimed at the community. Here in Minnesota, we've seen these acts too. We cannot allow tragedies like these to continue, and they must be condemned. We also have to recognize in this election, Donald Trump has made it clear where he stands with his anti-Muslim bigotry, with his threats to a Muslim ban. Vice President Harris and I are committed that this White House will stand up to it, will continue to condemn in all forms anti-Islam, anti-Arab sentiments being led by Donald Trump, but more importantly, a commitment that Muslims will be engaged in this administration and serve side by side. So we have just 33 days left. We have a choice in this country to find unity, to make sure we're protecting religious freedoms, to make sure we focus on the middle class, and that there is a new way forward for an opportunity for everyone. We know this community has strengthened America every single day you're here. So I ask each of you and let you know, it means the world to us for your endorsement because we stand side by side on those principles. We've got work to do. I would ask if make that door knock, make that call, do what we need to do, and wake up to be able to say, Madam President, and then work shoulder to shoulder to make this country better, safer, and more welcoming for everyone. So as the Vice President says, when we fight, we win, and we're glad to be in this fight alongside Engage. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Governor Walz. My name is Salman Ahmed. I serve as counsel here at Engage Action. I have the pleasure of introducing the United States Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. The senator will be talking about his work in advocating for a ceasefire in Gaza, as well as his leadership on the legislation to condition aid to Israel. And the senator hopefully will be touching upon the role of the United States Senate in the confirmation of Muslim judges onto the federal bench and in senior administrative positions. Thank you.
Well, Salman, thank you. And thank you for your leadership of our local Engage chapter here in Maryland. And to all of you who are part of Engage, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for standing up for universal values. And thank you for endorsing Kamala Harris for president and Tim Walz for vice president. As you can see, and we've been able to see him in action on the campaign trail, Tim Walz is a man of great dignity and great decency, somebody who I believe can relate and understand the challenges faced by people from all backgrounds. And I think he's going to be a vice president for all Americans, just as Kamala Harris will be a president for all Americans. I do just want to start here at home because I think we all know that Donald Trump, from the time he first ran for president, ran on a idea that was antithetical to the American idea. He ran on the idea that he was going to turn Americans against one another based on race or religion or ethnicity, that he would tear us apart, when the whole idea of America is people can come here, immigrate to the United States from all over the world, and pursue the American dream. And they would be judged, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, on the content of their character, not the color of their skin or their religion. This is a country for all people who embrace the fundamental principles of the United States. And Donald Trump, from the beginning, has run against that very fundamental idea. Whereas Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, is somebody who fully embraces the idea that we are a country that respects people from all different faiths and all different backgrounds. And she has been clear about that, both here at home. And I will say that I got to know her in the United States Senate. I happened to have come in on the same Senate class, as we say, with Kamala Harris back in 2017. And I can assure you that she is somebody who listens carefully, that she's a personal principal. She listens to all sides. And I am confident that she will listen very much to the pain being felt by the Muslim community with respect to what's happening in Gaza around the world, as she listens to the pain of all Americans regarding issues of concern. Now, I spoke about the importance of embracing, fundamental values here at home and rule of law and protecting our democracy, which of course is under threat from Donald Trump. But it's also important that we embrace and enforce those principles as part of our foreign policy. In fact, the Biden administration has said that it applies our values as part of our foreign policy, and that those values should apply not only to our foes when it's convenient, but also to allies and partners. Because if we don't apply those values universally, then our adversaries will see us as using things like human rights only as a convenient cudgel, but not as something that we consistently apply. And so this is why I have been clear that when it comes to our foreign policy, and specifically when it comes to the tragedy that's unfolding in Gaza after the tragedy of October 7th, that we need to recognize everybody's common humanity, that we need to recognize that all value, all lives are sacred. Palestinian lives, Israeli lives, Muslim lives, Jewish lives, Christian lives, Hindu lives. In other words, we need to make sure that we apply those values in a universal way. And I am confident that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz will do that. As we heard, as we know, Kamala Harris has been very vocal about calling for a ceasefire, an end of the war in Gaza, return of hostages, making sure that that is a priority, and making sure that the U.S. foreign policy really enforces those priorities. That is the position that she has articulated, starting in Selma, but going forward as well. And I will say that I believe that if the United States is going to maintain its credibility around the world, we need to make sure that we have an administration in Washington that applies those values across the board and understands our common humanity and speaks out about the civilian deaths in Gaza and the horrendous humanitarian situation in Gaza, just as we speak out after the horror of October 7th. And we need a president who will do that, who follows a principled position, follows a position where we speak about human rights and apply human rights equally. around the world as part of our foreign policy. And I believe that Kamala Harris, who, in addition to her experience as vice president, in addition to her experience in the Senate, is somebody who was a lawyer and understands the importance of the rule of law, will be somebody who applies those rules across the board. And I've been clear that every country around the world that receives U.S. security assistance needs to comply with the U.S. law with respect to ensuring that security assistance is used in accordance with international humanitarian law and used and make sure that those countries ensure that we allow the delivery of humanitarian assistance. And I and others have been clear that we, the United States, have not been enforcing those positions in a consistent manner. And I'm hopeful that we'll have Kamala Harris somebody who will apply those principles consistently to friend and foe alike. So look, let's, this is obviously a campaign. There's a lot at stake here. Most important, our fundamental values here at home are under threat from Donald Trump. And I do believe that if you look at what Donald Trump has talked about around the world, he is not somebody who cares about international human rights or international humanitarian law. And I believe that if we want to hold up our country to its highest values here at home and overseas, we need somebody who's going to do that. And that's Kamala Harris and Vice President Walz. So I want to thank all the members of the Muslim American community who are gathered here during this very, very difficult period, with much pain. And this is more than ever a time to embrace our common humanity and recognize that that we need to understand and respect everybody's pain, regardless of their religion or their background. And I want to thank the Muslim American community for doing that. I want to again thank Engage for supporting Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, and look forward to working with all of you in the days ahead to uphold the best of American values here at home and abroad.
Thank you, Senator Van Hollen. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Nada Al-Hanuti, and I'm the Deputy Organizing Director at Engage National. Today, I have the distinct honor of introducing someone who is incredibly special and deeply important to our community. Dr. Iltefat Hamzavi is a physician by day and a champion for our Muslim communities by night, a tireless advocate and a giant in the service to the Ummah. Dr. Iltefat's love and commitment to advancing our beloved Muslim communities is undeniable. As a co-founder of ISPU and the backbone of Engage, he has dedicated his life to building power within our communities and mentoring and investing in the future leaders of tomorrow. We owe him our deepest gratitude. It's an absolute privilege to introduce Dr. Iltefat Hamzavi.
Assalamu alaikum. And I'm so grateful for that wonderful introduction from Nada. I'm not deserving of that, but I'm really proud of what she's accomplished. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I think a lot of us in the American Muslim community are living in this impossible situation. We deeply love this country. We care about our neighbors of all races, all faiths, and all perspectives. And we see the potential of our country. And we also see where it falls down to protect all lives in the Middle East, Palestinian, Lebanese, Israeli, all lives. Protecting the civilians who have suffered so much in Gaza, protecting Americans of Palestinian descent and Lebanese descent who have suffered in situations where the government should support them and bring them home. But I'm thoughtful of the American experiment. Many of us know the story of Emmett Till, but the story of Emmett Till's mother is a story I want to share and remind everybody about today. When she was a young woman, she lost her teenage boy to a senseless act of brutal bigotry. And she believed enough in this country that she allowed this country to share in the pain of what she was facing and see what they did to that beautiful boy. He was killed in the peak of his teenage years because somebody thought he said something he never said, and because of the deep bigotry they had towards the community. Emmett Till's mother could have walked away from this country, never thought about engaging in civil rights or believing her community could build up the Civil Rights Act. And that beautiful Black American community created the chances for many of us who came from other countries to this beautiful land. But we are also clear-eyed, like Emmett Till's mother. This country is a country of hope. We hope to see our children who protest the injustices on our campuses. And they protest injustices that occurred in apartheid South Africa. They protest injustices that have occurred in the Middle East. We at the MGage family believe that those individuals have the First Amendment right to say what's right, what they believe to be right. We also hold this truth that inside of this pain, there's a recognition that our domestic challenges are also overwhelming us. American Muslims are stuck with the same issues that involve the economy, education, climate change. We're also the most diverse faith-based group in this country. We have to reconcile among each other as we advocate for this broader country. And we have to see the pain of the domestic issues. We have to see the pain of the foreign policy and the foreign issues. And we also have to embrace the hope of this country. And as the impossible situation occurs, we're reminded of the famous line from Muhammad Ali, "Impossible ain't nothing." I have the pleasure of introducing my friend, a mentor, a hero. Keith Ellison is from what I believe is the greatest state in the Union, the state of Michigan. He succeeded as a student, earned his law degree here, and went on to Minnesota politics. He was the first American Muslim to be embraced and elected to the Congress. And at that moment, he decided to embrace the impossible situation. How can you be a confident American and a confident Muslim? And the solution was Jefferson's Quran. He took his oath on that Quran. He took his oath to serve all of America. And like Emmett Till's mother, he has a hope in America. He also went on from Congress to become the Attorney General, one of the first Muslims to ever achieve statewide elected office in this country. And like any good American, he served all Americans. And when the case against the killers of George Floyd was entering the court, A.G. Ellison took that on himself. But A.G. Ellison isn't just a person who will serve the big cases. He believed in that reform. In the hardest moments of our community, when our First Amendment rights are trampled on in our college campuses, or in our stores, or in our mosques, or in our civic engagement projects, he is there. I've seen him comfort families. I've seen him show students that the law, however flawed it is going to be applied equally to them. Because Keith Ellison symbolizes hope. Like all of us, he is not a perfect human being. He has his challenges. He supports the Minnesota Timberwolves. My deepest apologies to that basketball team. But he's also a man of tremendous conviction and hope. I never, ever lose hope after talking to Attorney General Keith Ellison. And I hope for the next few minutes, you can face this impossible situation as an American Muslim, embrace the fact that we have a lot of pain that we must stand up and say something about, and also hope that our fellow Americans, Asian Americans, Black Americans, white Americans, Americans of all faiths and all backgrounds and ethnicities can actually stand with us when we need them. Because without this coalition that Keith has helped us put together, we aren't anything. But as Muhammad Ali said, impossible ain't nothing. I give you Keith Ellison.
Assalamu alaikum, friends. It's so good to be with all of you. And Brother Iltefat, what a kind and beautiful introduction. I'm sure I don't deserve it, but it's wonderful hearing from you. And I tell you, it is true that I'm a Timberwolves fan, but I'm always pulling for them Pistons, man. I remember going to Cobo Arena on the bus and bad boys, you know what I mean? Anyway, so good to be on the call with you, Iltefat. Also with my good friend, Chris Van Hollen, who has been upholding American law, insisting that it be followed, and I'm sure won't stop pushing for what is right. And then, of course, Wael, who's been working so hard. And then, of course, Tim Walz. A few things about Tim Walz I want you to know. He is right. He did host the first ever Eid observance at the governor's mansion, but he also appointed the very first Muslim to the Minnesota Supreme Court. You should know that Carl Procaccini married an Egyptian woman, took Shahada, and is a Muslim convert, and he's a member of the Minnesota Supreme Court, and he was the general counsel for the governor. And I mean, that's important, I think, for you to know. And I also want you to know that my own mosque, Masjid Nur, the one I go to every Friday I'm in town, he has visited us there and talked with Muslim community and engaged with Muslim community and is quite comfortable with our community. So I just wanted you to know that. So because I think the governor will be very influential in the White House, is definitely a listener, believes in the right things, and understands that the national interest of the United States is best served when we have peace in the world, and I'm sure we'll be a voice for it. Although I'm not here to speak for him, I know him, and I believe that that is what he stands for. Let me start my comments by saying that to lead is to go first. And what does that mean, going first? That means when you're not sure where everybody else stands, you consult your conscience and you consult people you trust, and then you do what you believe is right. If you are a leader, you're going to be the topic of criticism until people come to see that what you have moved out on conscience is the right course of action. I am a strong supporter of Harris and Walz because I believe this is the best way to stop the violence in Gaza and in Lebanon. And I'm sure that if we avoid this opportunity, it's going to perpetuate. And so in my view, this is what I'm choosing is the right way to get a better situation for all people, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, all people in the world. Kamala Harris is not the president of the United States. Under the Constitution, the only responsibility and obligation she has is to break ties in the Senate, preside the Senate, and fill in when if the president goes down. She cannot decide for President Biden what the right thing to do is. It's simply not the role that she holds right now. And in these next 33 days, I'm hoping that we can come together, convince our friends and relatives that the best chance for peace for our community is with Harris and Walz. I know she is a listener. I know her, and she is a listener. She's able to change her mind. She's not one of those people who gets locked in and that's it. She regards the Muslim ban as an odious, ugly, offensive affront to human dignity. She's smart. She is from a different generation. She wasn't born in the 40s. She's born in the 60s, and she has a different concept of what American sensibilities and American policy should be in the rest of the world. And I think she's far more open, to the suffering of all people, including Palestinian people, which is why on March 7th, as civil rights marchers were marching over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, she made one of the first statements about the need for a ceasefire. She connected the need for a ceasefire in Gaza with the American civil rights movement because she sees the clear connection between suffering people trying to be free all over the world. She also has said it repeatedly. She's not stopped saying it, and she's continued. And I believe that that sentiment is something that I believe we should hold to and actually push her on once she does win. Let me also mention to you that she was a supporter of the joint, the Iran deal, the JPAOA. This is the deal that President Obama was able to put together, which would have put us on a different trajectory with Iran, but Trump destroyed and has brought us to the moment that we're in right now. It's his fault that Iran is that we're in this conflict. He's the one who rejected peace and set us down this trajectory of war. And so the JCPOA is just something that she supported, she voted for, and she has continued to support. And I believe it's in that spirit that she will lead as a president. Let me also say this. Politics, friends, is really not about picking the person who's already 100% on what you believe is right. So often, politics is about getting the person in office who you believe you can push. I know we cannot push Trump. Chris Van Hollen, who has talked about enforcing laws like the Leahy Law and others, believes he can push, he can have influence with the Harris administration, but is sure he can't have it with the Trump administration. But let me also, as Iltefat did, borrow an example from the American Civil Rights Movement. In 1964, we all know about the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the law that banned racial discrimination in public accommodations, saying that you couldn't go into this store or that store. The one that banned discrimination in employment, banned discrimination in education, did a lot of critical things, perhaps the most important piece of legislation in American history. Well, let me tell you, a lot of people who were actual civil rights advocates who were in the street marching were mad about the 1964 Civil Rights Act. They were saying it's not enough. They haven't done enough. They're not moving fast enough because it didn't include voting and nor did it include housing. And so you had civil rights advocates opposing the civil rights bill because it wasn't fast enough or strong enough in their view. Those same people weren't necessarily on the team when the bill got passed. But the people who fought for that 1964 Civil Rights Act came back the next year and got civil rights in immigration, which allowed immigration from Asia, Latin America, and Africa, but also won the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And by 1968, we're able to pass the Fair Housing Act. What is my point? My point is the things that we fight for, we don't stop fighting for just because of an election. We're committed in the long term to a change in the policy. We get the people in office who we believe will listen to us on the policy change. And that is what I'm asking you to do right now. Got 33 more days. And I believe that this election is well within our grasp to win. And then, friends, I'm sorry to tell you, or maybe I'm happy to tell you, that we have a whole nother fight to start, which is to start persuading our government with allies like Chris Van Hollen and many others that the best course for the United States is to uphold our own law, like the Leahy Law and others, to say that any government which has a unit of its military violating the human rights of anyone cannot get support from the United States to continue to do that, and must open up corridors of humanitarian aid immediately. That's what I'm telling you. I'm not promising you a rose garden. I'm not saying you vote for one candidate or another and all will be well. I'm telling you that when we win if inshallah we win and get Harris in there, we're going to have to start another lobbying effort. But that is we'll be pushing on a door that is not locked, which I much would rather do. And I can tell you that on a domestic front, I don't have any problems with Kamala Harris. I think that she has been an advocate to end gun violence. She's invested and has plans to invest more in small business creation. She has been an advocate for criminal justice reform. She's been an opponent of the death penalty. And I will never forget that when George Floyd was killed, I was sitting in my own house, which I'm in right now, and I got a call shortly after Fajr prayer from the first guy you heard, I mean, not the first, but one of the first people you heard from, Tim Walz. What are we gonna do, man? This is serious. Let's get on this. Within a few days, he appointed me to be the lead prosecutor in that case. When we won the verdict, when the verdict was won, the first call I got was from Kamala Harris, who said, I wanna thank your team. And so we're dealing with compassionate people who do the right thing when nobody's looking. I have faith that they will continue to do that if we put them in the presidency. And I ask you, as your brother who loves you, let's get this done. So with that, I yield back and just let you know that we as a community have to hang together. We have an ummah here that we have to support. We have to respect the differences of opinion of each other. But in the end of the day, we have to do what is the least bad thing or the best thing for our community. And I ask you to do that now. So I'll yield back. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair, Attorney General Keith Ellison. Recently, we have really seen the importance of power building at every level, including at the state level. We've seen the importance of building with our city council resolutions. We've seen the importance of building at the state level against anti-boycott legislation and definitions that aim to criminalize our advocacy and our advocating for the issues that matter most to us. We have seen the importance of state prosecutors who are supposed to be our protectors and protecting the right to be able to protest and the right to free speech. Now, up next, I have the absolute pleasure of introducing one of the best organizers and leaders that I have had the pleasure of building with, my sister Salima Suswell, who not only led our Pennsylvania chapter for now 4 years, but is the CEO and founder of the Black Muslim Leadership Council. Sister Salima, thank you for joining us.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for that gracious introduction, my brother Muhammad Gula. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and I hope that you've had a great time listening to such phenomenal speakers, such gems being dropped, and so many important points being made this evening. As I look around in this virtual space, I am very encouraged. There are so many people present from many different walks of life, many different backgrounds and hometowns. And yet, despite these differences, we have gathered here today committed to one goal, the defense of our democracy. We are unified in this goal, and that is absolutely amazing to say. I am proud to be the National Senior Advisor and Pennsylvania Senior Advisor for Engage Action. Our Pennsylvania team has already begun voter mobilization efforts and knocking on thousands of doors and making thousands of phone calls. In the coming weeks, our Million Muslim Votes campaign will be launching its Muslim Vote Fest tour, which will center civic engagement with Black communities in important swing states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Georgia. And I am looking forward to meeting voters from across the nation. I've already been traveling on the campaign trail in battleground states, and I'm so excited to continue traveling the nation and meeting voters from across the country and showing them what can happen when we all work together to defend our freedoms. I am also proud to be the founder and CEO of the Black Muslim Leadership Council, a nonprofit started earlier this year that is dedicated to policy advocacy for urban communities, as well as voter turnout, civic education, and leadership development. Part of what we do with BMLC is build coalition and build community, and particularly around civil and human rights. We know that we are stronger when we work together, and we find both joy and power in diversity. BMLC is proud to be a Million Muslim Votes partner, and it is moments such as this one where our power as a community is one on full display. While the work of our organization in all organizations is wonderful and deeply important, it is key that each and every one of us takes action, and in this action that we're working together in unison. There is much too much at stake in this election to do anything else. We need a ceasefire, a permanent and immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Action must be taken to aid the Muslims suffering in Lebanon, Sudan, Congo, Yemen, Syria, Kashmir, and China, and more. Here at home, we also need protections for reproductive rights, and there are women dying at alarming rates during childbirth, especially Black women who die at much higher rates than women of other backgrounds in the United States of America. Action must be taken to create economic opportunity for all Americans, which includes building pathways to establish generational wealth, something long denied to Black people. We need to end the rampant gun violence that has led to deaths of so many, especially Black men in urban communities. We must ensure that the leaders of our country believe in the peaceful transfer of power and believe in our constitutional rights. In its purest essence, politics is about strategy. Each one of these causes I mentioned, and many that I did not, is worthy of our effort. Sometimes, in order to achieve the best possible outcome for ourselves and our community, we must make tough choices. But we must remember that the greatest gift of our democracy is our vote. The threat facing our country and our world is much too great not to use this gift. Thank you so much for your time. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone, again. Thank you so much, Sister Salima, and so wonderful to hear from you and from others, including our great friend, Attorney General Keith Ellison, and so many of you who have joined us tonight. I want to speak directly to the community. Our decision to endorse Vice President Harris and Governor Walz is the product of intense discussions, soul-searching, and strategic as well as principled thought process. At Engage, we have witnessed with all of you the horrors that have befallen our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Tens of thousands are dead and many more displaced. A famine is happening today with limited access to food, water, or hygiene. And as many have warned, including us, the war has now escalated and has placed more Arabs and Muslims in harm's way, including in Lebanon, where countless American citizens are at risk. We grieve for all of those lost and pray for an end to this violence. Since the beginning of the war, Engage Action has advocated for an immediate ceasefire through principled engagement with political leaders at every level of government. We are committed not only to ending the current onslaught, but also to support Palestinian freedom and liberation. Engage is committed to this for as long as it takes. Through hundreds of meetings and letters by many of the staff with us here today, we have pushed for ending our blanket support to the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's most extreme leader ever, including by conditioning aid or suspending it. We have also advocated domestically against the targeting of Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims, allies on school campuses and elsewhere. This war has impacted us here at home by harming our national fabric and placing our lives in danger. Clearly, these goals will require a sustained effort that may go after the elections. In fact, it will. After deep and serious engagement with our organization, our community, our partners, we assess that we have a responsibility not only to defeat Trump, to protect us from the harm that he has promised that he will inflict upon us and our Palestinian brothers and sisters, and so many other diverse communities, but to give us a chance to advance our anti-war objectives. Our endorsement is a clear-eyed guidance to our voters on Election Day, when either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris will be elected to become Commander-in-Chief. This endorsement is not acquiescence to the status quo. On the contrary, we believe that the most effective way to advance our anti-war goals is to block Trump's fascism and push for the change we want to see. This means that the Muslim American community must turn out in record numbers. We must, not just to defeat Trump, but also to refrain from supporting other alternatives who would make Trump's victory more likely. This is especially true in battleground states where the elections will be decided by very few votes. We understand that some Muslim voters, any voter, may feel a moral dilemma in voting for either major party. I do, my own family does, and they seek to support a third-party candidate. However, a vote for a third-party candidate is the road for victory for Donald Trump. Recall our community's decision to support the Bush-Cheney ticket in 2000. What followed was a 20-year and counting war on Islam and Muslims that gave us the invasion of Iraq, the invasion of Afghanistan, the Patriot Act, secret evidence, surveillance, CVE, and some would say the very Islamophobic populism that produced Donald Trump. We are asking Muslim voters to also consider the human impact of a second Trump presidency, not just on us here in the United States, but on the very people abroad we seek to help. I also want to stress that we are committed to continue to work with our community organizations and our allies and partners, including those who have decided on a different path. We are all one family, and we are committed to working with them after the elections, irrespective of the final outcome of these elections. We must, if we are serious about advancing our shared interests and goals and protecting our communities and our country. Now, I'm really excited and happy to introduce a dear friend of the Muslim American community. Serving California's 17th district, my old hometown, Congressman Khanna has been a steadfast ally of our community, especially during this difficult past year. He's a true believer in our pluralistic democracy. He has supported a ceasefire in Gaza and bringing accountability to our foreign policy, including ensuring that our military aid is in compliance with U.S. and international humanitarian law. Congressman Khanna is an ally against Islamophobia and all forms of hate. He's a critical thinker, a principled advocate, and we are honored to have him here. Congressman Khanna.
Well, thank you, Wael. Thank you for your incredible leadership. Thank you also to Dr. Iltefat, Hamzavi, for your friendship and leadership. And I appreciate the endorsement of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to be president, given the situation. I do want to start by talking about the situation in Lebanon. We still have 50,000 to 80,000 Americans there. And I just spoke out and sent a note to both Jake Sullivan and the State Department. We need to do more to get those citizens back home. We can't just have one commercial flight with 300 people coming back while Americans are dying there in Lebanon. And I think that this is an extraordinary opportunity, actually, for the administration to show an all-out mobilization of saving American lives in Lebanon. And I know many on this call in Mgage have been working to make sure that that evacuation effort is there, as we have seen so much tragedy of civilian lives lost. I was speaking to Debbie Dingle, who talked about funerals that she was going to in Michigan. But the reality is we don't have the choice between a Bernie Sanders and a Kamala Harris. Our choice is between a Kamala Harris and a Donald Trump. I mean, that is the truth. Would I wish that that we had a policy where we weren't giving a blank check to Netanyahu? Absolutely. Do I think that this administration's policy has been a success in the Middle East? No, it has not. I mean, how can you look at the results with the hostages not released, with 40,000 dead in Gaza, with the war escalating into Lebanon, with the war escalating into Iran, and say that this is has been a success? But let's look at what Donald Trump would do if he came to power. He is going to give a complete blank check to Netanyahu. He has not even ruled out of the table annexation. I mean, we're talking on the one hand about Vice President Harris, who has recognized Palestinian self-determination. Donald Trump has not, when he was there for the last 4 years, he did not rule out annexation. His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, has talked about commercially developing the Gaza for American commercial interests, hotel interests. And there is no doubt in my mind that if Donald Trump were there, he is going to give a carte blanche to Netanyahu and the right-wing government to do whatever they want to do, both in Lebanon and in Gaza and with the West Bank. Remember, he is the president who moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He has done so much damage in the recognition of Palestinian rights. And the Palestinian people and the Gazan people will be a complete afterthought if he wins. He also is likely to green light a military strike on Iran's nuclear facility. I mean, J.D. Vance basically said that at the debate. Can you imagine a regional war? First of all, what it would do to the price of gas, what it would do to the price of oil, what it would do to the possibility of a regional war with Iran having a 1 million-person army, and the conflict that could be unleashed based on that. So do I share an agreement on many things with the Biden-Harris administration on how they've approached this? No, I've been very vocal in disagreeing. But I am 110% convinced that we have a far, far, far better shot at saving lives in Gaza, at saving lives in Lebanon, if Vice President Harris is president, than if you have Donald Trump. And I am 100% convinced that we have at least some work in terms of the self-determination of the Palestinian people that will be recognized if we have a Harris-Walz administration. Let me end with this point. The good news is the young people. The good news is the future of the Democratic Party. The good news is that people like Andy Levin, who was a trailblazer on many of these issues, I mean, that is their sentiments of a Palestinian state living side by side with a secure Israel state. That is the sentiment of justice and Palestinian self-determination and peace. That is the sentiment, not just with the young people, not just with the young Jews and young Muslim Americans, but with the vast majority of Democrats. And I am confident that you cannot ignore the base of your party. And that base is going to have a louder and stronger voice in our country. And maybe that is the small silver lining from this incredible devastation that we've seen in Gaza, that we've seen in Lebanon, that we've seen with the loss of Israeli lives on October 7th, that we've seen with the extremism, is that from this, when the war ends, we'll be able to pick up and have a more just direction of policy in the Middle East, guided not by the politicians, not by the presidents or congresspeople, but guided by the people in communities who are out there demanding justice and demanding peace and demanding human rights, and who are becoming the majority, clearly, of our party, and I believe eventually the majority of this country. So thank you, MGH, for always being so thoughtful in your approach. Thank you for showing the courage to make this difficult choice in endorsing Kamala Harris and Vice President Walz. And I look forward to working with you to not just elect them, but then to help make sure that they continue to march in a direction of peace and justice.
Thank you so much, Congressman Khanna.
Thank you.
Thank you. Organizing isn't something we only do during presidential or midterm election years. It's a year-round effort, 365 days a year, because for our Muslim, BIPOC, and marginalized communities, there's no such thing as an off year. After the 2020 census, we witnessed a series of redistricting battles in the courts that deliberately targeted our pro-Palestinian allies. MGAGE is fully aware of these tactics and is already strategically planning for the 2030 census to ensure that our allies are protected and are no longer targeted in future redistricting efforts. We can no longer afford to lose champions like Jamal Bowman, Marie Newman, and our dear friend, Andy Levin. Andy Levin has been a steadfast ally and an outspoken advocate for our community for decades. His dedication to the self-determination of all people, including Palestinians, ultimately costed him his seat in the 2020 midterm elections. But that hasn't stopped him. Andy still continues to fight for policies that uplift our most marginalized voices. It is my absolute honor to introduce former Congressman Andy Levin.
Thank you so much, Nada, and salam alaikum to everybody. What an honor it is to join all these amazing speakers. I'm probably going to be the most frank speaker here. I have spent, as many of you know, the last year trying to get the Biden administration not to allow what Bibi Netanyahu says to be the limits of the possible, because by definition, if you do that, there is no hope for peace, no hope to end the bloodshed. And we haven't been successful. We know that the way Israel has prosecuted this war in Gaza has violated American law and international law. And we know that if we were upholding our laws, we would say to Israel, we're not giving you these weapons with no restrictions to go and wipe out whole apartment blocks and destroy lives and cause generational trauma and so forth. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, because I know that as soon as she's president, things are going to change, because I don't know that. And I think it's going to be hard, but I'm right there with Keith Ellison. And I'm right there with Khanna, that if we want justice for Muslims in Kashmir, if we want justice for Muslims in the Rohingya, in refugees in Bangladesh, and Lord knows if we want justice for Palestinians in Gaza, on the West Bank, Palestinian citizens of Israel, the people of Lebanon, we've got to vote for Kamala Harris. And I'm going to just tell you why. Donald Trump is he was the president of the United States. So that happened. And he is the only president, Republican or Democratic, to forsake Palestinian self-determination, Palestinian political rights, Palestinian human rights as U.S. policy. He said it, he did it. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem and got nothing, no concessions for it for Palestinians. He said Palestinians don't need political rights. We'll just make them economically happy, just like all of his nonsense about how just get him into the presidency and we're all going to be like super rich like him, or, his tariffs that are really a sales tax on the American people will make it, we'll take care of it. The Chinese will pay for it. That any economist knows is nonsense. Donald Trump was a disaster for human rights all around the world, and he would be an even worse disaster for the Palestinian people, other peoples around the world who are struggling for their rights, and for people in this country who want to advocate for them. He has said it. He will deport. I guess he won't deport me because I'm a citizen. He will deport people who are advocating for Palestinian rights. He will deport people who are advocating for the rights of immigrants from everywhere. So I've been in shoulder to shoulder with so many of you, fighting to make the Biden administration change course. These amazing young I'll say it proudly as a Michigander, mostly Michigan-based young people created the Listen to Michigan movement that became the Uncommitted movement. They weren't the Abandon Biden movement. They said, we want to vote for you in November, but how can we when our people are being slaughtered? We need you to change course. We're voting uncommitted on February 27th in Michigan, and then it followed around the country. I think because of our activism, your pushing, I think that had everything to do with Kamala Harris's obviously empathetic speech in Selma on the anniversary of Bloody Sunday. I think she really does want to listen. I think she really does want to hear multiple perspectives. I know that her foreign policy advisors have a little bit better history on this, but brothers and sisters, we cannot assume that she's going to be great on this, because even as Donald Trump has been a disaster and would be an even worse disaster, it's not as if previous Democratic and Republican presidents prevented Israel from establishing more and more settlements in the West Bank and so forth. So we're going to have to fight for justice for Palestine, but we have solid ground to stand on if we're fighting for it with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the White House. And we're just in quicksand if Donald Trump, God forbid, becomes president again. That's obviously without saying what a disaster he is for endangered species, for the climate, for anybody who cares about public education, for anybody who has a student loan, and on and on and on about all the domestic issues that Mgage fights for so brilliantly. So Neda, I'll stop there. Y'all, this is Rosh Hashanah. I've never done a public anything before on Rosh Hashanah, and I really thought hard about this. But I love you all so much. And this, I don't know, there were 300 people on here. This is so consequential, this discussion right now. This is historic. And I don't know if Wael is still there. Neda, I'm serious about this. If any one of these 300 people is still unconvinced, or Iltefat, I see you coming back. If anybody wants to talk to me, I want to talk to you. They'll give you my cell. Just ask Wael, ask Iltefat, ask Neda. I would love to talk to you about this, because we must prevent Donald Trump from getting near the White House ever again. And I really feel like Kamala Harris will be an honorable president, and we'll fight on for human rights with Democrats being like way better, but still imperfect, like they've always been. Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Representative Andy Levin. We could always count on you to be the supporter. Even when you were in Congress, it was always a pleasure setting up meetings on the Hill and asking you to join. And it was an even bigger pleasure to knock doors for you down in Michigan during your primary. And so thank you so much for all that you do. And most importantly, thank you for your allyship. Thank you for your candor. Thank you for breaking down the contrast for our guests. You were one of the people who I have always seen as an inspiration to speak up even against those who you share faith with as your brothers and sisters. And it's not often that you find inspiration from sometimes those who don't share your same religion and faith, but I believe that there's also brotherhood and respect that can come through justice and come through other things. So thank you for your sentiments from Representative Andy Levin. Thank you to all our speakers. Thank you to our listeners.